Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Developing Scholars, Race, Politics, and the Pursuit of Higher Education by Domingo Morel. Narrated by Timothy Andrés Pabon. Introduction. Graduation Day. On Sunday, May 17, 1998, the Providence Journal ran a front-page feature on Matthew Buchanan. Like many local newspapers across the country in the month of May, the Providence Journal featured Matthew as part of their college graduation coverage. Matt, as his family and friends call him, who on that day graduated with a bachelor's degree from the University of Rhode Island, was an unlikely graduate of the state's flagship university. Born in 1976 in Providence, Rhode Island, Matt is the youngest child of Joan and Joseph Buchanan. Joe Buck, as his father is known, has been a long-time community activist in Providence, who has advocated for tenants' rights, voting rights, and city employment for African Americans, among many other issues. The family grew up in poverty and lived in the Roger Williams housing project in Providence. In the 1980s, the projects, like many urban communities throughout the United States, were ravaged by crack cocaine. Matt's family was deeply affected by the crack epidemic of the 1980s. On December 22, 1986, when Matt was 10 years old, an altercation between his father and several men outside the projects nearly took Matt's life. That evening, Matt and his older brother were in their bunk beds when gunfire began to spread into their bedroom in the second-floor apartment. Just moments earlier, Matt's father had had an argument with several men who were smoking crack outside their building and told them to leave. The men returned and started shooting at the Buchanan apartment. The Providence Journal article stated that Matt remembers his father padding into the bedroom shouting, "Get down! Get down!" He remembers his big brother rolling off the bottom bunk and scooting from the room, and he remembers dropping from the top bunk, then collapsing onto the bottom bed, clutching his gut. The gunfire stopped. The cold of a mid-December night poured through the shattered window of the bedroom where a 10-year-old boy lay wounded. Buchanan's mother, Joan, knelt over him. "Are you all right?" she asked. He whispered, "I have a stomach ache." Mrs. Buchanan hugged her boy, and her hand felt the warmth of his blood. "Get help," she said. "Hurry up." Now, 11 years later, Matt Buchanan still carries a piece of that bullet in his gut. Matt survived the life-threatening bullet wound. Then, in 1993, as he was getting ready to start his senior year in high school, tragedy struck again. As the Providence Journal wrote, on a Friday night in September 1993, Buchanan's 18-year-old cousin Douglas Buchanan went to a party. There were 50 or 60 people there with a DJ and music. Shortly before midnight, Douglas had a brief argument with another teen. The harsh words never even turned to punches before the other guy pulled a pistol and shot Douglas through the eye. He was dead before the ambulance arrived. Douglas Buchanan, who was less than a year older and like a brother to Matt, was killed. Matt was supposed to be at the party with his cousin that evening. He recalls his cousin's death taking a bigger emotional toll on him than his own shooting. At age 18, he understood the significance of his cousin's death, the violence that surrounded him, and the grief his family felt in ways he was unable to understand at age 10 when he was shot. Despite the many challenges and the near loss of his life, Matt graduated from high school and went on to college, where he earned a bachelor's degree in human development and family studies from the University of Rhode Island in 1998. Although several barriers would prevent him from earning an undergraduate degree in education, the degree he was interested in pursuing, years later he would earn a master's degree in education. After working in various positions in several schools in Providence, including teaching, advising, and assistant principalship, in the fall of 2019, he became principal of Hope High School in Providence. Matt's educational and professional achievements, despite the personal and familial tragedies and the anguish that poverty and racism inflicted on him and his community, are a testament to his perseverance. However, what the Providence Journal did not mention in the article was that Matt was able to attend the University of Rhode Island because of the support of a college access program called Talent Development, TD. Talent Development Program. On a fall day in 1993, two recruiters, Leo DeMaio and Frank Forleo, visited Central High School, where Matt Buchanan was a senior, to speak to an auditorium full of seniors about the TD program. DeMaio and Forleo told the audience of students that although the idea of attending the University of Rhode Island was not considered a reality for many of the students in the auditorium, an auditorium where nearly 100% of the students were Black and Latino, poor, and would be first in their families to go to college, the program would offer an opportunity to gain admission even if they did not meet the regular admission requirements. They were direct with the students by acknowledging that the university's admission requirements, a high B average in a college prep curriculum, and an average scholastic aptitude test SAT score between 1,000 and 1,100, was out of reach to many students in the auditorium. Indeed, the average SAT score for a senior graduating from Central High School in 1994 was closer to 800, making them ineligible for admission to the university. Despite this, DeMaio and Forleo said that the program was created to give an opportunity to students who did not meet these requirements, and that is why they were at Central High School that day, as they would be at other urban high schools in Rhode Island that fall. The recruiters said that the program would not only help students get into the university, but they would also provide financial assistance to ensure that students had the financial aid they needed to graduate from the university. Moreover, they said the program would provide academic support and advising to make sure students were taking the right classes to graduate, in addition to receiving the emotional support that they would need as they made their journeys through college as first-generation college students. That recruitment visit convinced Matt that he could attend the University of Rhode Island, and Renee Bailey, a black teacher who mentored him and many other students at Central High School, encouraged him to apply. With the help of Gerald Williams and Brian Scott, two counselors at Central High School, Matt applied to the program. Early in 1994, he learned that he was accepted to the Talent Development Program at the University of Rhode Island. That spring, he joined the rest of the TD incoming class in attending preparatory classes one evening a week. Then on Sunday, June 19, 1994, 2 days after his high school graduation, Matt Buchanan began to attend college at the University of Rhode Island. Race, politics, and the pursuit of higher education. Although Matt had to overcome significant challenges to attend and graduate from college, the program that helped Matt also had to overcome significant challenges. The program was created in 1968, at a moment of social and political upheaval in the United States, as an effort to address enduring racial and economic inequalities. However, despite its success in providing opportunities to students who were not considered college-ready only a few years after its creation, the program faced threats to its survival. Disinvestment in state support for public higher education and attacks on affirmative action, among other issues, created the political climate for withdrawal of support for the program. In the face of this ominous political climate, what helps explain the survival of the TD program? How was the program able to overcome the political challenges that threatened its existence and allowed it to provide Matthew Buchanan and thousands of other students an opportunity to attend and graduate from the university decades after it was created? In trying to understand the survival of the TD program, other questions emerge. Why was the program created in the first place, and how? What was the underlying philosophy that motivated the creation of a college access program for students of color who did not meet admissions requirements to a university? Since the program was designed specifically to provide opportunities to students of underrepresented groups, how is the program part of a broader history of affirmative action policies in the United States? In answering these questions, the analysis of the TD program provides a lens that reveals questions and puzzles, not just about the TD program, but about race and higher education, and American politics more broadly. As this book will explain, the program was created in the 1960s in response to demands by the Black community in Providence. But the program was not unique. Between 1966 and 1968, 14 states created similar programs, which served thousands of students of color, mostly African American. Moreover, we learn that the programs were driven by a radical vision of college access. The community activists who helped create these programs believed that by providing academic, financial, and emotional support to students, regardless of their past academic record, these students could become successful college students. Their advocacy challenged conventions of merit and deservedness in the college admissions process. Additionally, they challenged conventional views of affirmative action policies, which focused on selecting or identifying high-achieving students of color to attend elite institutions of higher education. Instead, they argued for a community-centered approach to affirmative action, which focused on a logic of developing scholars who can be supported at their local public institutions of higher education. As a result, we come to understand about alternative visions of affirmative action and higher education possibilities that have received less attention in the scholarship. The book will also show that the urban uprisings of the 1960s did play a role in helping create the political conditions to create these college access programs. Community activists relied on the uprisings and the threat of future uprisings to convince policymakers to expand college access opportunities to Black students and other students of color. By showing how violent protest helped create the political conditions for policymakers to adhere to Black political demands, the book helps expand our understanding of the role of protest and violent protest in the process of policymaking. Through an examination of the TD program, we are also able to learn about the political factors that emerged to threaten these programs and public support for higher education in general. Between the 1970s and 1990s, state support for higher education decreased, which led to shrinking university budgets. Universities facing budget cuts decided to cut support for programs. In the 1980s, federal support for higher education, particularly for low-income students, also decreased. At the same time, legal and political challenges to affirmative action led universities to pull back on race-based admissions policies and programs. As a result, some programs became smaller, while others were eliminated. Despite these political challenges throughout the 1970s and 1980s, the TD program was able to withstand them and provide an opportunity to students like Matthew Buchanan and others in the 1990s and beyond. In the chapters that follow, I will show that the program was able to grow because it has operated as a political organization that has relied on political relationships within the university and at the state level to respond to university and statewide challenges to the program over time. Equally as important, when the program faced existential threats, like similar programs encountered in the 1970s and then again in the 1990s, TD students mobilized to defend the program by taking over university buildings and demanding the expansion of the program. In this respect, the organization has operated as an ongoing social movement that activates multiple approaches, including protest, in response to threats. By demonstrating how the program has been able to survive these political challenges through the use of protest, the book also contributes to our understanding of not only how policies are enacted, but how they are maintained. Building on scholarship by political scientists like Jamila Mishner, Mallory Sorrell, and Chloe Thurston, 2020, who argue for a deviation from the elite-centered, top-down approach to understanding policy processes, this book shows how non-elite actors at the local level help sustain policies through protest. Finally, Although the program has been able to respond to direct and indirect threats over time, an examination of the TD program also reveals one major challenge that has proven elusive and difficult to overcome. Over time, TD students have found it increasingly difficult to graduate with degrees in education, business, nursing, and engineering. These professions have historically provided a path to the middle class. Indeed, research has shown that the growing difficulty to enter these professions is not unique to TD students. The gap between whites and Black and Latino students who graduate in these majors has expanded over time. Scholars have attributed gaps in the selection of college majors to a number of factors, including expanded opportunities to choose majors that were previously unattainable to students of color. However, this book argues that the choice of major is a myth for many students of color. As later chapters will show, most public colleges and universities in the United States have implemented secondary admissions criteria to enter at least one of the selected majors like education, business, nursing, and engineering. These secondary admissions criteria require students to have higher grade point averages, GPAs, and in some instances, standardized test scores than needed for regular admissions to the university. Additionally, increased accreditation and certification requirements to enter certain professional fields have also contributed to the increasing competitiveness of selected majors. Whereas explanations for existing racial gaps in majors and professions have focused on individual choices made by students, this book shows that the emergence of secondary admissions processes were a systematic response to the expansion of college access opportunities in the 1960s, particularly for students of color. Building on the policy retrenchment scholarship by political scientists Eric Schickler, 2001, and Jacob Hacker, 2004, I argue that these hidden forms of restriction are a form of layering that emerged to circumvent the political success of the movement to expand college access to marginalized groups. Relying on an original database of GPA requirements for selected college majors, business, education, engineering, and nursing at state colleges and universities in the United States, this study shows that the strongest predictor of increased GPA requirements for the selected majors was increasing enrollment of students of color and women at an institution, the same groups that benefited from the expansion of college access in the 1960s. The changing requirements to enter specific majors has had a negative effect on students of color in these fields of study. For students entering universities with the support of special college access programs, the changing requirements are even more problematic. The purpose of the programs to provide access to students who lack the GPA and SAT scores to enter the university but with support can develop into scholars and professionals has been undermined by these secondary admissions, certification, and licensing requirements. I argue that these barriers, which are largely invisible, represent a form of what Max Weber and other sociologists have referred to as social closure, the concept that organizations adopt restrictive policies to cut off access to new competitors. Following the expansion of college access opportunities for students of color in the 1960s, professional organizations like teacher credentialing organizations, the American Bar Association, the American Medical Association, and others worked with state legislatures and university faculty to adopt increasingly competitive admissions and licensing requirements that have amounted to social closure for students of color. The private foundations, professional organizations, and accrediting organizations which work in conjunction with state governments to establish and modify standards for entrance into majors and the professions act as credential cartels, I argue, to restrict access to the professions. The emergence of policies that restrict access to specific careers raises questions concerning higher education, the political and economic factors that shape it, and its ability to serve as a mechanism to address inequality. Although many believe that higher education provides the best pathway to upward mobility and addresses concerns with inequality in the United States, The findings in this book suggest that under existing conditions, higher education is incapable of serving as a vehicle for upward mobility. Visible and enduring barriers like concerns with college admissions, decreasing state and federal funding for higher education, increasing tuition and student loan debt, all pose significant challenges for higher education's ability to serve as a vehicle for upward mobility. However, as this book argues, there are less visible barriers that equally challenge higher education's promise of expanding economic opportunity to historically marginalized populations, particularly students of color. Lack of access to majors and to the professions. The underexamined aspect of college access is also undermining higher education. In the chapters that follow, I argue that addressing inequality through higher education will require the type of radical vision of college access and investment in higher education that the advocates of the special college access programs fought for in the 1960s. However, that is not enough. Addressing inequality through higher education will also require a political movement to dismantle the secondary admissions requirements and credential cartels that emerged in the 1970s, following the expansion of college access opportunities for historically marginalized populations. Furthermore, I argue that the political mobilization has to be extended to transform the economy, which for the last 4 decades has focused on privatization and dismantling public institutions, to one that is capable of creating pathways to upward mobility and meaningfully addressing inequality. Through the study of the TD program and other special college access programs of the 1960s, and the logic of developing scholars that the programs promoted, we can learn about the political dynamics that severely constrain the capacity to address inequality through education. At the same time, by examining the programs of the 1960s, their radical vision and their political struggles, we are also able to better understand the promise of higher education as a vehicle to creating a more equal society. It is this radical imagination of a more equal society that allowed Matt Buchanan to enter and graduate from his own state institution of higher education, which historically had been out of reach to him, and many other poor students of color, including myself. I, too, am a graduate of the University of Rhode Island. I am also a graduate of Central High School in Providence. I was in the Central High School auditorium with Matt in the fall of 1993, when Leo DeMaio and Frank Forleo, the recruiters from the TD program, came to talk to us about attending college. Like Matt, I am a college graduate because of the TD program. Our families raised us in economic poverty. By the time we entered our senior year in high school and the college application process began, we did not have the SAT scores or GPAs that met admission standards to our state university. Yet with the support of the TD program, we gained admission and graduated from the University of Rhode Island. Our experience mirrors that of countless students of color across the United States whose intelligence, talent, and potential are not recognized by traditional metrics and who therefore do not merit certain life chances. I am not only a TD graduate, but I also worked for the program. After graduating from the University of Rhode Island, I worked at Rhode Island College, where I recruited and admitted students for the preparatory enrollment program, a program similar to TD. After 4 years in the admissions office, I returned to the TD program as an advisor, where I worked for 7 years before leaving to pursue a PhD in political science at Brown University. My experience as a student, recruiter, and advisor helps inform the questions I seek to answer in this book. I am aware that there will be questions raised about my ability to objectively conduct this study because I, as a beneficiary of the program, will inherently be biased about the program. I reject this premise. In fact, my insights as a student and staff member motivated the puzzles and questions examined in this book. The questions motivated by these insights led to hypotheses that required original data collection to test, in addition to conducting interviews and researching archival data. I discuss these data methods in greater detail in the following chapter. Equally as important, over my 11-year experience in higher education, I spoke to thousands of students at high schools and community organizations and have advised hundreds of students, all of which has helped influence the questions I examine throughout this book. The findings, I argue, present novel insights into the politics of college access, the political and economic ramifications of expansion of college access, and ultimately, our ability to address inequality through higher education. This interrogation and the results published in this volume are no less robust, informative, and important because I am beneficiary of a program created to provide opportunities that did not exist for people like me. Indeed, the more than 20-year period of analysis that has gone into the writing of this book, as a student, recruiter, advisor, and academic, is a rejection of the view in social science that adequate analysis requires separation between the analyst and the variables of study. We, the variables, who have been dismissed and marginalized, have life and agency, and an ability to self-analyze and produce knowledge for us and others. Part 1. Social Movements for College Access. 1. Rebellion and College for All. Community-centered affirmative action and the role of violent protest in policy formation and policy maintenance. Why did states create special college access programs for students of color in the 1960s? Since there is debate among scholars about the role of urban uprisings in the creation of college access opportunities, did the urban rebellions of the 1960s play a role in the creation of these programs? And if so, how? Moreover, since these programs were designed specifically for students of color, how are they part of the broader history of affirmative action policy in the United States? Finally, since many of the initiatives that led to greater college access for historically excluded groups in the 1960s, including affirmative action, student financial aid, and state support for higher education, have been significantly diminished, what political factors help explain the survival of a college access program for students of color? Part 1 of this book, chapters 1 through 4, focuses on these questions and begins by examining the politics that led to the creation of special college access programs for students of color. To understand why these programs were created, we have to turn our attention to understanding the evolution of higher education in the United States, the expansion for higher education opportunities after World War II, and the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s. Expanding higher education in the United States. In the early 20th century, government investment in colleges and universities and college attendance among young Americans was not expansive. However, beginning in the 1930s, the federal government began to increase investment in higher education. During the New Deal, the federal government relied on support from institutions of higher education to promote agriculture policies, public works, and civic training. Then after World War II, efforts to expand access to higher education and investments in financial aid to assist low-income Americans expanded rapidly. The most significant effort to increase college access came in the form of the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, more commonly known as the GI Bill. Between 1940 and 1960, the number of Americans who attended college more than doubled from 1.5 million to 3.6 million. This was due largely in part to federal support, mainly the GI Bill. The expansion of higher education was part of the most significant and successful expansion of the middle class in American history. And yet, while many were enjoying the opportunities of college access, many more were excluded. Women and people of color were not part of the vast expansion of the post-World War II college access efforts. Although college enrollment rates increased significantly during the post-World War II period, women's presence as a proportion of college students declined significantly during the post-war era. Deandra Rose writes that, in hope of creating
Sample complete. Ready to continue?